Welcome to the No Streetlights podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Tim. We'll be engaging in vulnerable conversations every Friday to shine a light on what we've been through,
how it changed us, and what we learned. We want to encourage societal growth towards kindness through understanding.
These conversations and the associated language can be triggering.
Listen at your own discretion.
But please reach out if we need to be doing something better.
So, let's take a breath, relax, and be welcome. Tim, I know you just got back to work, and I have brought back someone who has never stepped away from work.
Oh, wow.
My father-in-law has had an illustrious career, both in and out of the military. Everyone, welcome to the show, Edward McDonald.
I tried to step away once or twice.
Welcome, Ed.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And just let me know what form you want to take, what questions you got. Nothing's really out of bounds, to include my combat days. So we can talk a little bit about that.
Where did you grow up, and what was growing up like for you?
Okay, so I grew up in a very small town, Barron, Wisconsin. I think the population has grown all the way up to 2,500 people now. When I was there, it was 2,000 people.
Oh, that's massive.
It's mainly a big farming community. There was one major plant in the whole place, and it was the turkey hatchery. But basically, it was the turkey capital of Wisconsin. They did 26,000 turkeys a day processing through the plant. Oh, it's called Jenny O now, is what it's called.
Holy hell.
So they process thousands of turkey every day, and they have farms all around that community that basically are hatcheries, housing the turkeys themselves, farming for all the feed that they use, just barns and barns and barns of turkeys everywhere. Wisconsin's a big farming community. We kind of grew up outside the town originally actually my dad had his first major house was a church that he remodeled. He was a construction guy for 40 years, owned the business, and my brother currently owns the business. So we grew up next to a farm. His brothers were all farmers and loggers. So every one of them did timber for years. And then they went from there to different jobs. My uncle ended up going in the Air Force during the Vietnam era. So did his brother. Actually, I think both brothers went there. My dad couldn't go because he had flat feet. And back then, flat feet meant you can't join the military. So my uncle ended up being a 4-star general in the Air Force, highly decorated. And then his last duty was to run Wright-Patterson Air Force Base during Desert Storm. So his biggest complaint was, hey, I don't have enough pallets to send stuff all over the world. His other brother had polio when he was young, so he always had a bad leg. He ended up doing a plumbing business, ran that for years, instilled hard work with us. My dad did construction and ran the bowling alley. So as a younger kid, I would help out in projects in construction. And then also at night, we go to the bowling alley and bowl and help out there and cook food and serve drinks and clean up. And that was our main life that we did. Because we're around the farm and the turkey hatchery, one of the sons that owned the turkey plant, I worked his farm weekends and sometimes during the summer, baling hay, taking care of the thoroughbreds because he breeded Arabian horses and also German shepherds. So I helped out there on the weekends primarily. And then I did construction during the week. Like I said, grew up in a small town. So one of the things, my early claim to fame was when I was a freshman in high school, my brother was a sophomore on the baseball team. And we took the team to state that year. The other freshman hit a base hit and I came in and scored, and they've never went back to state, nor did they ever win it again. So That's a kind of a claim to fame. And then, of course, like all folks that grew up in that part of the world, you did hunting, fishing. I wrestled, played hockey. Hockey was mandatory, basketball. Later on, we moved a couple times. We lived next to a golf course. So I would go golfing every afternoon, play a couple holes, and then come back home. But a pretty dull life in the earlier years. And then when I was about, 17, I was thinking about college. Hey, what do I want to do? My brother had just entered into college. Dad couldn't afford both of us going to college. So my ideal of college was join the military. They had the early program where you could come in 6 months early. So I went down and registered for the US Army and came back all proud and said, hey, I'm registered. I need you to sign off. My dad said, I don't think so. So my uncle gave me a call. He was a colonel back then. He said, you ain't joining the Army, you're joining the Air Force. So made a couple calls. Next thing I know, I'm in the Air Force. So that's
Nice.
how I started off. And that's kind of the early years. Of course, my younger brother was Heart of the North wrestling champion 3 years in a row. My other brother went to Platteville College. And while he was there, he decided that he worked UPS part time, ended up working there 40 years, and still is in the original town that they had the UPS where he got hired at. It's Platteville, Wisconsin, and that's where Lands End is. Just a small company. They produce clothing and just about every kind of paraphernalia you can think of. Lansdowne is what it's called. Him and his son currently work at Lansdowne. One's the engineer, and then my brother is just the landscaper now because he doesn't want to do anything else.
I don't blame him.
That's what happens when you retire from UPS. So that's my early years right up before I joined the Air Force. And I joined actually when I was 17 and a half. Actually got in there 21 days after my 18th birthday when I went to basic. So,
What was basic like?
well, I went to basic training July 28th in San Antonio, Texas. To say it was hot was an understatement. When you went out on the parade field, it was nothing to see 2 or 3 people passing out on the parade deck because it was 100 degrees in the shade, right? Now, basic training was fairly easy back then. I don't know what it is like now. Open barracks. Everybody had a bunk. You did gang showers. There were no doors or stalls in there. So everybody knew what business they were doing. You cleaned your own bathrooms. You cleaned your own beds. Everything was right corners, righty tighty. Everything was folded and everything was inspected every day. Not really hard for a guy like me, but they taught you the basics, right? And then, of course, you did all sorts of courses, financial courses, medical courses, anything that gives you the basic understanding of what you would need in life, they produced during that time. It wasn't like Marine Corps or the Army where it's mainly physical. This was more mental, learning the basics. You did run, I think, a whole half a mile or a mile and a half, something like that. It wasn't very far, but I wasn't a big runner anyway. Football, you ran 1 mile. Yeah, basic training to me was pretty easy. It was, I think it was 8 weeks back then. I think it's still that. Air Force is not your tough area to go through.
Yes,
Kind of
Navy
like the
boot
Navy,
camp
right?
was not arduous.
Yeah. Yeah, this day and
Yeah.
age, definitely.
No, no, my training really started after basic. That got progressively tougher the next day. But I had originally joined as an air traffic controller. That was going to be my MOS. That's what I wanted to do. My uncle was a B-52 pilot during Vietnam. So he flew all sorts of things and he designed the new B-1 and B-2 bomber. He was the lead engineer who designed that. So just to go back a little bit, My uncle was in linebacker 1, linebacker 2, and all the different missions. He was a major there, and he flew any major mission he normally flew on. And he did 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam. He never really talks about it, but I know he was a badass flying because those things did Mach 1.1 on the deck. So that's all I know.
Yeah, I can imagine. I want to interject here just real quick, if you don't mind, Ed. So, kind of judging over everything you were talking about from your younger years growing up and everybody in your family, I'm skipping ahead just a little bit here, but judging based off of everything I've heard so far, you're a CEO currently.
Of my current company? Yes.
So, I think it's pretty safe to say that you've had business like instilled in your mind since you were young.
Definitely. Like my dad ran his construction company. I was supposed to take it over and I decided to do something else. He was not happy my first year in service,
Yeah.
but after I got into it a little bit, he got it because he tried to do the same thing, right? And I had reasons to do it. Plus, I'd never failed anything before, so I figured I'd try it. And the good thing is because I did that, my younger brother took over the business because he had no intentions of doing that,
Yeah.
but he's very good at it.
It's good. It's interesting how our life callings tend to find us in the strangest of ways.
Yeah, you never know. And like I tell people, just keep doing what you're doing. If you're experienced at something, stick with it because something will come along that will just amaze you.
Yeah.
And I'm about to take that amazing trip. In fact, our business just closed on another company yesterday. So
That's incredible. Congratulations.
that one's going to take off like a rocket ship.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
so
you.
awesome.
Yeah, we got lucky. We've been business partners and friends for years. Currently work together. I was selling my company to him. I'm going to be the COO of that company. And then he's the CEO. And then we're bringing in another guy who actually went through buds 4 times and still didn't make it and it ended up medically eliminated from the Navy due to that. And I said, anybody that made it through Hell Week 4 times has my respect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not an easy time.
No, not at all. Yeah. So the company's only been in business a couple months. And the guy that is supporting us is the father in law of one of the owners. Me and the other guy, I'm 60 this year. He's 65. So we're not there to have the longevity. He's only, I think, 28. So his whole thing is his father in law's wants to take care of him. My business partner, he's a former Navy captain. So we'll all be service disabled doing this business. The guy that's backing us owns 17 companies, has bought or sold about 71 companies. He's currently in with a group of folks of a company that's worth 800 million.
Oh my
I'm not
gosh.
sure how much he's worth, but he's not there for the money.
Mhm.
He's really there for God, country, and figuring out a new way of doing things.
Yeah.
We're going to invest in new technologies, advanced systems, IT systems. In the last 2 years, he's taken 3 companies, built them from scratch, sold 2 to khaki and 1 to GDIT. Because of that, we're working on some new technologies that I can't talk about yet because we're still doing white papers on it. But in a year, you will hear about these technologies being mandated by the US government.
Wow.
And it's all to repel what China is doing right now. But we're still in the early stages of figuring it out and using R&D money. By the end of it, we're going to have a whole new process of reclaiming rare earth materials. Let's put it that way. And that's just one of like 4 things that we're doing at the same time.
Jeez. That is incredible.
We got a bunch of smart people, smarter than me. I just know how to lead them. That's all.
Yeah. It's the definition of surround yourself by success, you know?
Yeah, I did R&D for a few years, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things I learned doing R&D for special ops is this: it's not just the technology; it's how you implement it. And one of the technologies I implemented that people think is funny now is blue force tracking. Right? We took a small prototype, and when I say prototype, I put 138 of them in the field at one time. That was my prototype. We took one and built them, and I call it limited production. And then we got them to work. I also put laser rangefinder there to find scopes of weapons because these snipers were starting to pick our guys off, and we didn't like that much. So I developed, this guy developed this technology in the lab to, you'll get your scopes and you'll have all these different anti-reflective stuff on them, whether it's a filter, whatever else. It didn't matter. We could pick it up. It would find the scope every time. And then our Navy SEAL brethren could just put a bullet in it, call it
Oh
a
my
day.
gosh.
And it hasn't come out yet. So it may be classified still, but the war's over. So it's okay.
We can cut any of the stuff that might be like non-disclosure agreement based areas. So
I won't worry about it. I developed that 20 years ago.
yeah.
I'm sure somebody did something fancier than that.
I don't know. That sounds pretty fancy to me.
Yeah, I got to work with Mr. Barrett, the guy that did the 60 cal sniper rifle. Well, Mr. Barrett designed that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we developed a 20 millimeter version of it because when we first went into Iraq, we couldn't penetrate their armor and they were penetrating ours. So we had to find a weapon that could fix that problem. So I built them or Mr. Barrett and his daughter built him a 20 millimeter sniper rifle. And that had no problem getting through the metal.
How much charge is there behind that?
Unless you have reactive armor, it'll go through any tank known to man.
Good Lord.
While I was just using the training round, I put it through 2 inches of steel plating at 800 yards.
Dang.
Now, the explosive head one, I don't know, because when I left, they were still testing that one. But that round had been developed for years. So the unique thing was Harris, which most people don't know, does do weapons. They built the training round, and then I think someone else was going to build the original one. But we had plenty of 20 millimeter, right? We've been using it, since World War II. But what we didn't have is a sniper rifle that could utilize it. But he built it in such a way there was no recoil at all. And anybody that's fired a 20 millimeter can absolutely tell you there's recoil.
I wonder if that was baffle,
I bet.
Especially on a gunship.
baffle or
right?
floating barrel, or
Yeah, he had a special baffle in it, and it was in the actual.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like a floating, like shock absorber. Had to do with the tripod and stuff. And the best part was this: you could take the current sniper rifle, the 60 millimeter, and swap the upper receiver, and there's your 20 millimeter. So that was the best part of it.
Wow.
Yep.
Flexible, interchangeable,
Yep.
plenty of ammunition. I mean,
Yep.
that's pretty much the equation for a war-winning weapon, essentially.
Yeah, force multiplier, right? Because
Yeah, absolutely.
the whole point of me designing stuff for special ops is to do what I know they do, which is go in and 3 main missions that you ever see a special ops guy do, right? Go in there and observe the enemy, find out what you're doing, and pass back intel. That's the first thing you do. And if you think we're not in every country on the planet, you're wrong. And whenever there's something that went down, I guarantee we have eyes on the ground somewhere, and you'll never know about it. 2, we go in and get hostage rescue, right? Or take out terrorists. And the third mission is special ops is never there to be the big force multiplier. You bring in the 101st, you bring in the 82nd, bring in the Rangers. You don't bring in the special ops guys. They're there for unique missions. Could be search and destroy, could be a pilot pickup, anything. We're not there to spend a lot of time, and we're definitely not there to engage the enemy if we can. But when we engage, we're lethal. Nobody better on the planet. And I can absolutely tell you from firsthand knowledge, Al Qaeda has no chance against us.
So, how do you know these things, Ed? I thought you were an air traffic controller.
Oh, hey, can you hang on 1 second?
Absolutely.
Give me 1 second. Sorry about that, guys.
No, you're good.
We're not doing live, are we?
No, yeah.
Nobody told you about this live?
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Won't be the first time. I was on Good Morning America Christmas Day. I think it was 1994 in Bosnia.
Wow.
So that was pretty interesting. The clip's still out there.
And now we're going to find that clip.
Yeah, no kidding. Bosnia.
I may have it somewhere. I got a CD of it. I'll send it to you guys.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's me and one other guy with the ones that used to do Good Morning America. Anyway, I have a photo of her and the guy, but one of our PJs used to date her. We won't go into that.
That's awesome.
Anyway, to get back to it. So in basic training, they had this outfit called Combat Control, and they went around to they were primarily focused on air traffic controllers, and they went and recruited all the classes that came in. When they came around, they said, yeah, we have this job coming out, but it's not really what you think. It's kind of combat related, but it's not mandatory job. It's not a critical career field, which was both bullshit, right? They were both critical and very demanding. So I said, yeah, I'll try it, And then after basic, you would go to Lackland Air Force Base, right? Which is where they train all their air traffic controllers in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. So I ended up going there. And my first day, and they don't tell you this, but they kind of do harassment, kind of like the SEALs, except we actually get to sleep. So the first thing they'll do when you get into the dorm, they'll completely trash your room. And I do mean completely trash. And then you have to put it back together. And then you're forced to do sit-ups, push-ups, flutter kicks until you can't do no more. And me being an old construction guy and playing football, I was fairly strong. So, but yeah, they would definitely cripple you. So the job's called Combat Control. You may have heard of pararescue, mm-hmm. which are the medical equipment. So the combat controller are the air traffic controllers is their primary mission. And you do air traffic control in austere conditions. And you can pick anyone you want to name. Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, anywhere where there's a dirt airfield, a combat controller is on the ground. So they're certified air traffic controllers. That's why you go through that school. And we do get certified through the FAA. I had a level 5 tower rating in the FAA, and you keep that your whole career. And you do training at least quarterly on that. And then I served in a couple towers, and where I got my certification was King Fahd during Desert Storm.
Jeez.
And my level of traffic was...
It's a hell of a testing site.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I had 36 in the pattern. If you know anything about traffic, that's a lot. There was no radar. We had what's called a TACAN, which basically sends out a signal and interrogates it and tells you where the runway is, but it doesn't do avoidance of other aircraft. So we had A-10s on one side, helicopters and commercial traffic on the other. I got so busy during my evaluation that I told a whole flight of UH-60s to hold short. Well, I got a little confused, didn't realize they were on the threshold. So they hovered on the threshold. So my instructor was just laughing so hard he couldn't ding me at all. And I said, I'll proceed, clear to land. We had 800 helicopters there and 110 A-10s. So it was pretty much an arsenal on the ground. We had so many helicopters, we parked them for 3 miles in the desert.
Wow.
Plus, we brought in all sorts of commercial. When I got there, they were just finishing the runway. They got the lights, but they hadn't painted the center lines on it yet. That's how new it was.
Wow.
And then I ran King Fahd Range 2. I was the only guy running it because the contractor that was doing it decided it was too dangerous for him to be there anymore. So I got to run the range for, I don't know, 60 days or so before we got ready to move forward. Like I said, combat control, do close air support. I always called it a secondary mission. I said anybody that can do air traffic control can call bombs on target. I was ATAC rated, which means basically I can deliver weapon systems from an airplane down to a target location without killing anybody. That's basically what it means. We have certain trainers in the Air Force that do that. They're all combat controllers. Some are retired, most are not. And whenever you've seen the war that kicked off after 9/11, that was pretty much all combat controllers. Now, the news will tell you they're SF guys, but that was bullshit because those guys absolutely had a combat controller on the ground. And I don't know if you guys remember way back when Rumsfeld was pointing at the horse soldiers. Well, that was Bart Decker. He was a combat controller. And that was the first time he ever rode a horse. And it was his first time in combat. It was like my fourth. So kind of fun.
Jeez.
Were you embedded with any teams, or were you?
Yeah. So as a combat controller, right, your first thing is to go through air traffic control school. It's 3 months. Once you get done there, you go to jump school, which is, I think it was 3 weeks. So I went to jump school. By the time you get there, you're in incredible shape. I could do 200 push-ups in one sitting, 18 pull-ups, flutter kicks, everything. Well, at jump school, you have to do like 30 or 40 push-ups. Well, the guy that was counting my push-ups kept going 1, 1, 1, 1, 2. So they failed me the first round because they want to fail at least 1 or 2 Air Force guys, right? You got to be proud of the Army. So my buddies went through. So I got pissed off and I said, okay, I'm going to put in a report. This is bullshit. So I went in front of the lieutenant colonel there. He counted every push-up. When he got to 50, he stopped and he says, I don't know why you're not in class. I said, me either. So I went to the very next class, which put me back a couple weeks. And then went through basic, did the basic tower training. You do a couple jumps there. And then I think it was 5 is the basic jumps. You have to do a couple slick with equipment. And then I don't think we did any night jumps there. They were later on. And then from there, you get assigned to a team. Now it's a little bit different. You get assigned to Hurlburt Field, Florida, and they have a whole training program for the next year. So every combat controller, every pararescueman, every combat weather guy, every TAC P now goes through Hurlburt Field, Florida, where they do a full train up of their basic qualifications. That includes pool training, running, lifting. They have all sorts of doctors. They have all sorts of folks on staff to do health and assessment, injuries. And that all stem from guys like me going out and just doing it the hard way, because we've been around since actually the first guy was World War II. And he was still around. Benny, he came from the 82nd Airborne, and he was what they called back then a forward air controller. We started to get a reputation for ourselves in Vietnam. So when we were in Vietnam, our guys were stationed in Thailand. And a buddy of mine, Mort Friedman, was the NCOIC for there. Well, Mort was my first NCOIC, and every morning he'd walk in the Philippines and hit me in the chest. Hey, did you see that one coming? I said, you son of a bitch. And he did that every morning until I flinched. And then I finally started blocking him. He said, now you learned the lesson. Don't be a punching bag.
What a hell of a lesson.
Yeah, lesson learned. But the real aspect that they brought to the table was they could take any aircraft under any inventory and call close air support on it. And getting back to your original question of coalition forces and special forces, we go to jump training, dive training, halo training, and then some guys go to air assault. Some guys will go to LRPs, long range patrolling. Some guys will actually go to ranger school, and a couple others. And that is to get them prepped to go with the units that they're supporting, which are the SEAL teams, to include SEAL Team 6 or Dev Group, all the special forces. Normally, you assign a TAC P to the special forces major groups, 82nd Airborne, and they do close air support, right, for their weapon systems. We provide close air support only for airframes normally, but I have called in, back in the day when we had the big aircraft carriers, we called in the 23-inch guns into Iraq. So that was kind of fun. And then we have done artillery too, especially in Afghanistan. You would have artillery, but most of that was done by aircraft because these guys would just hunker down the mountains. But you had to be trained in these basic things just to go out with the guys, right? My average rucksack was between 100 and 120 pounds. That included radios, batteries, helium when we had to put up balloons to check the weather. When I threw on my bulletproof vest, and normally I won't carry the plates because what's the point? And then of course, 210 rounds of bullets for your M4 carbine now it is, and then your 9mm. And I always figured, guys, if you see me shooting, then we're fucked. But if I'm doing this with the strobe light, that means we're being picked up now. So that's the whole reason to do this training, and you stay in pretty good shape throughout your career. You had to do a PT test once a year, 3 miles, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and then it was mile swim, mile or mile and a half swim. And as you get older, you get slower in the runs.
Yeah.
Especially rucking a 100-pound sack.
Yeah. So it was funny. I was in Afghanistan and the guy goes, I just don't understand why you can't keep up with us. I said, oh, really? Okay. So I sat down, put my ruck down, pick it up. Go ahead. I dare you. He couldn't even lift it. We're not going to complain no more. You take your time. I said, because you ain't getting off this mountain without me. So talk as much crap as you want.
Yep.
Talk shit to the guy who's calling the bird to come pick us up. Yeah.
So one of the stories that most people don't know is we have now a combat controller who died in Afghanistan that has a Medal of Honor. And he was on a mission, and I was over there in Arar back in the time. We had early part of the war. I was to kind of go fast forward a little bit, give you guys a hint, because you get this training, right? And you go out and do all these missions for many years, either in Korea, Philippines, or elsewhere. And you're training up the whole time. So your whole job in the military is to keep in shape, to train and exercise, right? That's what we do. We perform real world exercises. Well, a few of us played combat more than once, even when it wasn't declared combat. And the big test came. The one test was Desert Storm. Yeah, we kind of filled everything out. But We pretty much destroyed them the first 3 weeks. They went from the 6th largest army to the 60th by the 3rd week.
Jeez.
And so that was pretty incredible. And everybody's seen the stories on that. But what's just now coming out is the stories in Afghanistan. That was a 20-year war. Nobody expected it. Nobody wanted it. And we ended up leaving the place, in my opinion, worse than it was when we got there, because now they're armed better.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's not our choice. That's policymakers. It just pisses everybody off.
Yeah.
After 9/11 hit, you know, they shut down the country completely, right? Nothing flew in, nothing flew out. I was in McCord, Washington. I was the standards and evaluations representative for our organization, about 100 people. So my job was to keep everybody trained and certified in air traffic control, jumping, PT, scuba diving, whatever it may be. I was a master diver, halo jump master, what we call a dive suit, been through all the military courses. So I was basically one of the most qualified guys there. I was asked to do that job because I'd hurt my knee a few times. So he wanted an easier job, not realizing that I had to do everything that I'm asking everybody else to do, jump in, dive, whatever. So that didn't work out too well. So 9/11 happens, right? And we're sitting there and I'm at the gym and, you know, I see the Twin Towers like everybody else. Hey, what's going on with Twin Towers? Something's smoking. And I'm lifting weights and I see the second aircraft hit. I said, holy shit, we're at war. Because you could clearly see it was an airplane hitting it. And I was like, there's no doubt in my mind we're at a war. So we were up, if you know anything about McCord, we have this facility there that keeps an eye on all of Canada, all of Alaska for any incoming missiles. So the next thing I know, this thing goes active and they start shutting down the air traffic control. They're flying F-16s, F-15s all over the place. And we're worried they're going to fucking blow up something, right? So I happen to be one of the few guys that can get in that facility because I own the skiff for our place because I was a guy who did embassy security surveys. And if you don't know anything about that, that's the 0300 evacuation plan. Some people call them neo evacuations. I was one of many that did these around the world. So there's always a plan besides what the RSO and the ambassador does. There's a plan for getting people out. And there's pickup sites, there's how you breach everything in the US Embassy. Because if it's locked down, you need to know how to get in. And one of my jobs was to do that, to do airfield landings, be able to land any kind of aircraft known to man into that airport and be able to evacuate people by both road and by helicopter. And some were ports. So I did a few cruise ships too, which was fun. But anyway, so we had a skiff facility, right? And there were only 2 skiffs on the base. I had one, and the other one was owned by what's called AWADS, which is the early warning tracking system in a nutshell. And it's coalition network up there. And so we're tracking stuff, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm looking at them and going, I don't know. We're at war, but I don't know with who, and I don't know about what. So everybody's kind of like figuring it out. Then this will get to the premise of what I'll talk about called Department of Homeland Security, where that went. So we ended up getting a call and we're trying to figure it out. Well, my bosses called me up, I think it was 5 days later, and said, hey, there's some aircraft leaving the States. I need you on the first commercial jet going over to Saudi Arabia. And at first I was supposed to go to a place called ARAR. Most people call it Qatar, QATAR, you know, the hubbub of Hamas right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
But back then it was not. So I got on the first 747 going to Thailand, and there were exactly the crew members me, my buddy, and 3 other people on the whole plane because no one wanted to fly.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wanted to fly.
Fair enough.
So I spent a night in Thailand, then flew over to Qatar. And the reason why I was there was our people, well, my old commander was there and he had just PCS. 8 people controlled that area. And that's where we tracked all the special ops forces in theater. And I do mean in theater, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Indochina, you name it, that's where they tracked them. And there were just 8 people that did that. We had, I think, 24 units around that area. My job was to get all of them to where I was at. And because I knew aircraft, how to get SAM, how to get airlift in theater, because I was stationed in Germany for 3 years. And I was what they call the ESAC guy, which was the NEO evacuation guy in Europe. I got nodded for it and said, "Hey, you get to go." I said, "Oh, thank you a lot."
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So we started off, and the first phone call I got was from a guy named Sergeant Major O'Connor when I first got there. He says, "Ed, I hear you're in theater." I said, "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" He says, "You know, I'm a command sergeant major, right?" "Okay, so you want to be called sergeant major, command sergeant major, what?" "Command sergeant major." "Okay." By the end of it, we were first name basis. He said, "I was the command sergeant major for JSOC, just left there. I'm now in charge of JIFFyCom." And, you know, JIFCOM kind of went away, sort of. And then Tommy Franks grabbed me by the arm and said, "I'm now his sergeant major for this clusterfuck, whatever it is." And I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean for me?" He says, "Well, he's briefing the president and he needs to know shit." I said, "Well, you and everybody else on this planet, because nobody knows jack shit right now. All we know is that we got hit by terrorists. We're not even sure which ones. And nobody knows." And that's back when JSOC was off the shores with JSOCs everywhere all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They were on, you know, a ship waiting to deal death somewhere. They just didn't know where. So my job was basically to figure out where everybody was at and put them in one place so that we could figure the shit out. So I was having the word hit the street. Next thing you know, I was getting phone calls from, "Hey, this is Major such and such. I got these vehicles. How can you get me?" And then I call up Stratcom, or what's it called? It used to be called MAC. Now it's AMC. I think they just changed the name for airlift so that they could charge us an extra $1,000,000, but give or take. So I said, "Stand by. I'm going to send you an airplane." They're like, "How can you get airlift? We can't get airlift." "No problem. I can get airlift. I know these guys because I served with a bunch of them." So I said, "Hey, I need you to pick up SEAL team, whatever." And they're here. And by the way, I need you to pick up 3 pallets of food for the US Embassy while you're there, because they do embassy runs once a month. I said, "Okay, we'll stop by, get it." And 3 pallets of food and booze show up. And then the SEALs get on board. And I said, "Oh, that small pallet's for you guys, because I think you're going to need it." He said, "What'd you buy us?" I said, "That's a present from the US Embassy thanking you for coming."
Hell yes.
That included a lot of booze that we probably didn't need to give them, and a lot of different kinds of food, fresh food, right? That they probably won't get elsewhere. And then I shipped all these guys to the base, and we made a place. El Juf was one of them. I was on the Army base where we stored all the tanks after the desert. People were wondering where the tanks went. They went all there. And then I sat there waiting to get people going. Within 3 weeks, Sergeant Major O'Connor was with me. Another guy named Frank Bosia, he was former SEAL Team 6, had a West Coast training, and also the only nuclear guy I knew. It was us 3 setting up a whole bunch of coalition stuff, let's put it that way. So we started that base off, and we went from 8 people to 1,800 in a matter of 3 weeks. And we brought in all of the geo coordinates because people needed maps of that area. And the only maps we had were on 3 hard drives, which were contained up here. And we brought those in and started loading people up. Then the agency boys showed up. And then one day GDIT showed up, and they had a contract to put up satellite communications. So they showed up with generators, these big satellite communications, and all of a sudden we were a hub of the largest percentage of communications in the world in about 3 weeks. Talk about learning mobile communications. And that included satellites, computers, and we were given authority pretty much carte blanche. And the only order that we had was one from the president and said, "We don't capture. Have a nice day." And I said, "So what the fuck does that mean?" So basically it said kill and don't capture the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't know who that enemy was. So we were all just kind of like this. I don't know. And of course, at the time, the agency boys are putting all this together, trying to figure out who did it. One saying it's Yemen, one saying it's terrorists, one saying it's just different terrorists. There were like 5 different cells. So no one knew.
Well, they're human intelligence, and we know the limits of that.
Yeah.
Well, between human communications, once you started putting together the picture, you started to get a clearer picture, right? But remember, there's still chaos going on in the States. People were scared to fly. We didn't know if they were going to hit us again. There were people that were deploying, telling their wives they're going here and there. So that became an intelligence issue. You started seeing guys like Rumfield say, "If I get one more wife that says something where her husband's going, I'm going to put her in jail." It's like, oh, good luck with that. My guys gave me an MRSAT and an AT&T World cell phone. And when I'm talking about worldwide, back then AT&T was worldwide. That cell phone worked everywhere. Don't ask me how, but it worked. I don't know what it cost. Don't care.
Don't care. That's what you needed. Got the job done.
They called me. And 2 things they told me when I left. He said, you can't wear anything military and get rid of anything that identifies you as a U.S. soldier. And I said, oh, that's a nice thing. But I did carry a couple passports, so that helped out. But that was the start of the war, and it's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hell of a story.
It got much more intense after that.
I imagine.
And then to circle all back, so the combat control brethren do have one combat controller that won the Medal of Honor. And that stemmed from an operation, not Anaconda, but later on in the war, where Al-Qaeda was kind of consolidating themselves into different hiding sites. Now, these hiding sites were things that we funded during the war with Russia. And people forget this, right? So Al-Qaeda, we built. This wasn't a self-built echelon. We built Al-Qaeda. Make no mistake. Al-Qaeda was our fighting force against the Russians. And then when we stopped paying them, they decided that they didn't like us anymore, right? Just like everybody. And that became a problem. And we could have fixed it early, but we didn't. So there was an incident, and we were basically destroying Al-Qaeda. I mean, Al-Qaeda in all essence was dead after 3 months of being in that war. They were going to be totally eliminated. I don't know who made the decision of appeasement, but that was stupid. We should have just eliminated them and done with it. And then we should have went over to Iran and said, you know what? Keep talking. We'll take you down too. And Pakistan started up too. We said, well, we're flying drones out here. Maybe we'll just drop a couple. But, different things happen. Hey, remember when Pakistan had somebody up on the embassy, and they kept saying, hey, who's that guy up in the embassy with the radio? It looked like radio antennas. Well, that was me. I was trying to get it because when you're in that part of the world, it tells you that the angle is this. Well, the angle is not that. It's actually much more flat. And the only reason why I knew it is the CIA guy said, "Hey, we've been here for years. That chart of yours is just bullshit." Said the curvature of the Earth is different here. I said, "Yeah, it's probably the weight of all the oil." But
Jesus.
yeah, so we did a lot of missions. So anyway, to get back to the story, so John is the only. Well, he died. He got the Medal of Honor. But how he got this is this. So we were doing a mission in there, and the night before, they flew into this place up in the mountains, and they got shot up. We flew Apaches that led in 47s, right? And back then, if you know 47s and 46s, the engines weren't strong enough to be at 10, 11, 12,000 feet. They just don't hover well up there. Since then, we built new aircraft with better engines, right? So you would get up there and you kind of hover. And if somebody shot something at you, you kind of move like this.
With the tilt.
You weren't really moving much. So the guys were coming in the night before and got shot up. So I read the intel reports that morning and I said, "Hey, look, because I was supposed to do the night shift, right?" So I come in the afternoon and I said, "Well, I told them not to fly in there because there's activity." So I wrote up a report, sent it over to them. Of course, guys ignore reports all the time.
Of course.
So they ended up coming in and they flew in the next night. And have you ever heard of what's called Roberts Ridge?
No.
No? Okay. So what ended up happening is they flew in, they had SEALs on board, and then John Chapman was there. And they're coming in to this site to take out some of the enemy. Let's just put it that way. I won't go into what the classified reasons were. And when you stand up to get on a fast rope, typically what happens is we unhook. We have these lanyards that we connect to the bottom of the aircraft. But when we stand up, we're a minute out, we unhook that thing, we get the rope ready. Well, the SEAL had the rope by one hand and they did one of these maneuvers, right? And it was just enough to throw him off guard and he fell out the back.
Oof.
And he ended up falling, I don't know, 20, 30 feet. So they do a sweep back, they come back in again, and they see him on the ground, and the enemy had already captured him. And they get down on the ground a little bit later and start moving towards him. Well, John was kind of got ahead of the SEALs for whatever reason, and he was getting pinned down. So he got shot several times. The SEALs seen him, thought he was dead, backed off, went back to the aircraft, got picked up, and then John got up again, started shooting back, and kind of fended these guys off for a little bit longer before he succumbed to the wounds. The other gentleman, Robert, I think he was also upgraded to the Medal of Honor, which he should be. They killed him on the spot when they were coming up. That's just how these guys are. And then the SEALs left, and then they came back later to do body recoveries. Within that same period of time, 247s were in the same area, and they both got missile shot at them, and we downed two aircraft, 247s on the mountains. One was full of Rangers and some JSOC folks, and the other folks had similar people because we all kind of rode the same airplanes. There's only so many helicopters out there. I had put in 3 teams the night before, or 2 nights before, with the Australian SAS, which are some pretty badass guys. And we also went with the British SAS. So I had 3 teams on the mountain when these guys crashed. And they were there specifically to call in close air support for another mission, which ended up being a new mission with downed airmen and Army and Navy folks on the ground. You can imagine the chaos that ensued when you have 247s full of special ops guys on the ground. We ended up finding out that that was a stronghold for Al Qaeda in the mountains, and they had stash weapons everywhere. For the next 12 hours, these guys would come up the mountain, shoot at our guys, go back down the mountain. My guys that were doing close air support were delivering death on the side of the mountain in between my guys. And then PJs were taking care of wounds. So were the medical guys on the ground. People were shot up. A couple people died. They pulled all the people out the next night, I think it was. And we got everybody out on a night mission and flew them all out. But for 12 hours, they were on the ground, literally taking fire from they think it was 150 or more Al
Oh
Qaeda.
my God.
And that was quite the battle. And so there were multiple things going on in theater at that time. And the max number of people we could have on the ground in Afghanistan was 5,000 people back then. And people say, oh, we had hundreds of thousands. Not in the early part. None of that was true. So, yeah, that happened. We blew the helicopters in place. We had 753 MH-53s. We lost 4 in one day, along with 2 Apaches. So it was not a good day for the U.S. military.
Yeah.
Because those things don't just roll off the assembly line.
Yeah, they're not over there being made like a Ford.
Yeah, not like today. But yeah, we had several of those. I mean, guys will tell you war stories all the time. The thing I'll tell you about war is nobody wants to be there, but you have to do it. I think our military is the most impressive. And if you push us, we'll just take you out. There's no doubt in my mind, if we want to do something, we'll do it.
Definitely.
You know, these other countries talk a lot of shit. We don't have to. We've shown them in 20 years what we can do. We don't need to say anymore. China's unproven in that grounds, right? We're proven.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing you guys may not know, the Secretary of the Navy currently there, Carlos, he's an old coworker of ours. He owned one of the companies that we worked with. I talk to him every once in a while. I think that guy's doing a phenomenal job with the Navy. He's trying to revamp some of the warships that were originally designed for mission sets are no longer valid. So he was changing that up as he's going. Because he was, I think he was a commander in the Navy, and he did a lot of things. Actually, the guy I'm serving with served with him in the Navy. It was amazing when he got the nod, even though it was from Biden. It happened. It was pretty impressive. We were very happy, and I've heard a few of your speeches, and I am just totally impressed by people who get it and are there to take care of the people and the mission. And you know, he's political. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he knows Miss Schultz real well, and she's an interesting person, but he cares about people. And he's former Navy, 24 years, I think. And he ran a service disabled company that supported the Navy for close to 20 years. So I think he's a very impressive person. And that's kind of my short story. I know I kind of beat around the bush a little bit. Combat controllers never go in by themselves. They're always with some other agency or team. We're there as a supportive role to bring air power and coalition power to the forefront. And we're very good at our jobs. You don't hear about us a lot. They're making a movie of John Chapman, which would be pretty cool to see. There's a book out on him, but the couple books that are out, I'm in there a few times. I tend not to want my name in a lot of stuff. In the walls of US SOCOM, there's a couple pictures of me there, and people are like, hey, where's that at? And I said, all I can tell you is it was a mission that we saved people's lives, because it's still classified to this day.
Hell yeah.
And there's no medals on that one. I guarantee that.
You should have a couple gold or bronze stars.
I don't have the exact number, but I know that Combat Control has more medals since the war kicked off than any other unit, to include the SEALs and the SF. We have a lot of silver stars, ton of bronze stars, as you can imagine.
Well, you weren't going over there for.
Medals.
No, I wasn't supposed to be there. I'm not there. I was never there.
Yeah, you were there to do a job, not have your name shouted through someone's
Well, he was never
megaphone.
there, Aaron. Clearly.
To this day, I was on blanket orders. If you guys don't know what those are, blanket orders for the Air Force meant I could go anywhere, anytime, anyhow, and spend as much money as I want. And I was on full per diem the whole time.
Some amazing orders.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. That's what they signed when I left.
Well, Ed, we have been recording now for a little over an hour. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, I know we didn't even really get into your time after the military, but I don't know. I'm so blown away with the stories that you've told us already. I don't know how you feel about it, Aaron, but I just want to have Ed back on here sometime so we can continue hearing more about this.
Yes, I think we'll have to bring you back because this in-depth discourse on how the war developed from the point of view of someone who is already established and went over there in a command and control situation is not something we've heard before.
No, probably not. I mean, most units go there and they're part of a team, right? I was part of, hey, we don't know what we're getting into. Let's figure it out type, right?
Yeah.
So, quick story to switch gears. Once I got out, right, I'd put in for retirement 3 days before 9/11. It got approved 3 days after 9/11. But of course, everybody got put on stop loss.
Mhm.
Well, they made the mistake of sometime in early 2002 that, hey, we're going to open it back up. You can retire. So I elected to retire. And then I went to work for ASOC with the secretary's mission. And the reason why our mission stemmed from that, a guy named Alan Yoshida, who just passed here about a month ago, he was doing some close air support there with a team of SF guys. And he had a TAC P with him who had been working the radio all day, calling in close air support. And the problem was back then, the radios, when the battery died, it default back to your location. So you had to reset the equipment to where it's supposed to deliver bombs. Well, nobody really knew that back then. And the bomb ended up hitting those guys. Luckily, Alan had to been leaning over when the bomb hit. So the guy that came up with us at DHS, he was a SEAL Team 6, I think he was back then. He actually went out, he was one of the first guys on site there, and he seen this guy buried under the sand. He says, he's dead. And he started moving. And Alan actually had part of his shoulder blown off, but they got it reattached. And then, of course, every kind of explosive damage you can think of internally through the ears. So he could never swim again after that, right? And then when Alan recovered and got his medals, he got his medals from the Secretary of the Air Force, Mr. Roach. Well, I just recently retired when he was giving them, and he said, Alan, you almost made the ultimate sacrifice for us. What can we do for you? He says, make sure this never happens again. He says, that's your requirement. That man. And that man went from a staff sergeant to a chief master sergeant, injured, couldn't deploy anymore, doing this type of stuff. And I helped him for about a year before I joined DHS of designing next generation equipment for anybody, for any warrior. But really it was geared towards the airmen in the field. But because we worked with USOCOM very tightly, I didn't care if it was a weapon, a laser, a bullet, a rucksack, the design of that equipment, like you see the modular equipment, bulletproof and stuff like that. That's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working there one day and my buddy gave me a call. My buddy's up in the White House, right? And he calls me up and he says, would you like a new mission? I said, hell no, I just retired. I want to kind of chill out here in Florida and enjoy my life. He says, we're starting this little club called Department of Homeland Security, and I'm going to be working directly for the secretary. Do you want to come? I said, no, not really. I don't want to come up there. So he called me a couple weeks later. No, really, we're going to start this up, and we need guys like you to help organize it. No, no. The third time he calls me up, he said, we have some job recs. Why don't you apply for a job rec? I said, okay, I'll apply. And I had just finished my master's degree when I was in Afghanistan. I wrote my paper in Afghanistan.
Holy
and
crap.
my instructor kept emailing me back when it was rudimentary. He goes, I just don't understand why you can't make these changes to your final dissertation on your master's degree. I said, I can't tell you where I'm at, but if you turn on the TV, you probably know where I'm at. Roger, pass. And I graduated when I came back. But that gave me an opportunity. I was applying for GS 15 and 14 jobs. Master put me over for the 15. I ended up coming up there as a senior watch officer. I showed up October 3rd, 2003. That was the first day that they actually officially started the organization. Although they had a few people, I was number 3 employee official, and started up there as a senior watch officer. And then I ended up taking on the role of incident management lead during Katrina and Rita. And I ran it's called something different now, but it was the interagency group up there, which consisted of 50 of the lead agencies in the country, State Department, everybody. So during Katrina and Rita, I had Miss Rice call me several times asking me what the hell's going on. And I said, well, I can't tell you right now, but I can tell you this, that we have a bunch of people that weren't supposed to be there in this stadium that has half a roof. And we told them that was not a safe place to be. And they're on the second floor because the first floor is flooded. And then the president calls up 2 minutes later. The president wants to know how many people are dead. And I was like, what do you mean you want to know how many people are dead? Shit, I don't know. Hang on a second. So I call up. The head of ICE is down there because he's doing an assessment. I give him a call and I'm like, hey, can you tell me how many people are dead? Because the president wants to know. I don't know what the fuck he wants to know that for. But okay, he's the president. We'll give him his info. He goes around and goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. Are you sure? Yeah, I can count them twice, but there's 8. I have 10 fingers. I said, okay. So that's what I told him. I said, my buddy on the ground before you start has 10 fingers. He counted 8. And the president laughed. You're the guy I heard about. And I said, yeah, I'm that guy. And that's back when there were fires going on. We had floods going on. We had the biggest hurricane that hit the country in 100 years going on. We had terrorist activities going on around the world. And everybody was trying to figure out what DHS was going to do. Had 22 agencies. Nobody knew how they were going to work together. We had a bunch of people trying to figure it out, but it was new, right? Tom Ridge was in charge, smart guy, E6 Vietnam, lawyer, governor. And the only reason why he was standing there is he wasn't the vice president because Dick Cheney took the job. And Bob Steffen, my buddy that hired me, he was his special assistant. And the first thing he told all these 22 agencies was, Secretary Ridge just retired me. He's a former colonel. And by the way, he was the only officer that was hired up there. All the rest of us were enlisted guys, right? He says, I don't hire officers. They don't want to work. Direct quote. So Bob goes in the room and Bob's telling me the story. I said, this is going to be a good story. I know it is. And he says, Tom just retired me. I'm a former colonel and I don't really beat along the bush. And he starts saying how good these guys are doing and what a great job they're doing and how professional they are. And they've been in this business for 30 years. And he says, that's why I know you guys will have no problem doing exactly what I'm going to tell you next. And he laid out the whole organization right there. And the guy has a photographic memory, right? And these guys are trying to buck him. And he goes, nope, here's what we're going to do. And they go, what an asshole. And he walked out. And Bob's this big 6'4" guy, right? And he looks like a football player. And Tom Ridge is a pretty big guy. And their chief of staff is an old Vietnam vet. And he's the same. So it looks like a football crew walking in, right? So nobody wanted to mess with him. And they go, you know this Bob Steffens guy? I say, yeah, I know Bob. He says, he's an asshole. Yep, probably right. That's why I love him. He's the smartest guy in this room. He said, what's your job? My job is to unfuck everything that you guys have done in the last 30 years. But, you know, who am I? Well, what's your experience? And I started listing it out, and the guy just stopped. Once I picked his chin off the floor, he was like, oh, I think you're qualified. And he said, I know more about terrorism than you will ever experience in your whole life. And there's 3 things I can tell you about terrorists. They don't care about anything. Religion's a cover story. They're there to kill whatever they don't like, and they don't care who they have to harm to do it. They just don't care because they're fundamentalists. Religion's something that they get buy-in for, right?
If I could
Yeah.
give us a little perspective on this.
Sure.
Whenever my wife and I came back from the honeymoon a month or so ago,
Mm-hmm.
I finally asked you how big your impact was over there when you were a combat controller. And you said that your first tour in the sandbox, your team had 660 something confirmed.
834 confirmed kills, 5,624 JDAMs expended, to include 2 air fusion bombs, which are 24,000 pounds each, or 22,000, give or take some. And that was confirmed. The rest, we're not really sure because we buried a lot, but we can confirm that through drones. And when I talk about some of these incidents, I didn't say this. So Roberts Ridge and John Chapman, those were the first ever broadcasted live events on a Predator feed of an actual Medal of Honor winner, and also of a attack going on after a crash, right? Nobody's ever recorded this in war history. They've done bits and pieces, but not like this, not live the entire time. And I had to send all this to the White House because it wasn't a direct feed to them, nor was it a direct feed to USOCOM. It was in theater, but not out of theater. And that's some of the things you've seen later on in life went directly back to USOCOM and other agencies. But the commanders on the field didn't really like that. They like local control, not somebody back in the fort telling them what to do, which I agree with, right? But nowadays, it's anything that you can think of is integrated in the States, integrated when we go places. All the theater commanders have access to it. We have access to satellites, commercial, you name it. If we have to take over commercial, it is possible, but we work through our partners, you know, whether it be a company, normally it's a company, and we try to get legislation to help that. But nowadays, it's a concerted effort. There's a standing body that does it in the States. We never had that. I mean, even during World War II, we didn't have that, right? You just had the State Department, you had the Defense Department, and they ran things. But there was nothing in the US to do this. There is now. And when you see stuff that happens on the border, yeah, they're letting people through, but that's a policy decision. We can absolutely shut everything down, and it wouldn't take long. Literally a phone call. But that's not me. I don't control that. That's policymakers, right? And that's why we're run by civilians, and guys like me don't run the country because they wouldn't like me very much. And I thought about politics, but politics to me is dirty. And DHS was about as political as you can get. Yeah, I stepped
Yeah.
in number 2 a couple of times.
Yeah.
Ed, you can't tell the chief of staff this kind of stuff. And I said, okay, all right, I won't tell him anymore. I'll ask him. How's that?
I'll ask you.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And my other buddy that was up there, he was an assistant senior watch officer, and then he did different things. Yeah, that was the SEAL Team 6 guy. We had a lot of conversations about the war up there, what went good, what went bad. And the bottom line is this. We were in war for 20 years. A lot of things went good. A lot of things went bad. But our people are our strongest asset. And you got to support them. And that's why I always support DAV, any kind of veterans group, and I'm part of those, right? Life member. And, I try to get out as much as I can. And some of these coalitions are important. And I still stay in touch with people around the world. Not too much with my Australian SAS brethren anymore, but they still remember me since I threw them out of a lot of perfectly good aircraft. And we had, at least back then, I drank a little bit of beer. And I remember first time training with those guys. The SEAL guys came in and they're just like spinning real fast. And one guy hit the ground like pretty hard because he didn't hit the brakes enough, and he's spinning around. And I ran up, are you okay? And I said, I guess you won't do that again, will you? So that afternoon, hey, we're done jumping. Australians love their beer. We went into the pub. We killed the first 2 kegs, and I think it was 10 or 12 minutes. And then we had to go find some more beer. They don't breathe without beer. Trust me.
It's like us Navy folks.
Yeah. Yeah. You give Navy liberty, it's all over. Yeah. I remember Subic ships would come in and we wouldn't go down there.
That's why they keep us on the ship.
In fact, I was just there, in December, January, because my wife just got back from Philippines. And yeah, it's pretty interesting what we're doing there. We do have some Navy ships around. Let's put it that way. There's definitely some Air Force boys up at Clark. I won't tell you exactly what they're doing, but I had some interesting conversations, say the least.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, they won't tell me classified stuff, but I knew what they were doing anyway.
As long as they don't tell you, you can find out.
Well, yeah, it's easy.
Yeah.
I mean, you fly what aircraft? Yeah, I know what you're doing.
Yeah, I got it.
I know your mission's it.
I'm basically a professional. I think I understand what the mission is.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, maybe next time we'll talk a little bit of how the business is run.
Yeah.
But since I left DHS, I worked for Mantech, BAE, my own company called Bowhead, which is an ANC company. And then, of course, I'm moving into a new adventure. I think it'll be announced soon, but it's called Enigma, hence the name. I thought it was pretty cool that he used Enigma. And we're going to build that into a R&D and classified type of company so that we can do next generation systems. And we don't care because we got background in IT, cybersecurity, intelligence gathering, weapons. I led the nuclear team for a while at DHS because not that I didn't have enough jobs to do, but I was in charge of the skiffs. I was in charge of the red line, if you ever heard of the red line. And then you may have heard it on the news once or twice for Iran. And then because they had nobody else, I sat the board I was the non-voting member. So you got Secret Service, FBI, DOD. So they're the board members. And then I was a non-voting board member of all the incidents. So like after 9/11, the first Super Bowl, that was a national event, right? So we helped do that and a few other things. So anytime there is a national security event, like for instance, the RNC and DNC, they're considered national events for security purposes because you got former presidents there, you got all sorts of dignitaries, rich people, just something could happen. So I would sit on those things and, we'd look at security systems. I was mainly there to be the filter for information to DHS to make it quick. If they needed something, I could find it. But they've been doing their jobs for 20, 30 years, way before DHS made it. I was just giving them additional assets they may or may not have access to, and I could make it happen now. There were no red tape with me. It was like, you needed something, I'd pick up the phone and call the boss. Whether that was the undersecretary of the State Department, didn't matter. I would just pick up the phone. And they were like, how in the hell you do that? And I said, well, they have to come to my interagency group and they don't like when Bob gets mad. I hope that was enough info for you.
Well, that was a lot of incredible stories too. Holy crap.
Oh, those aren't even the fun stories. I'm going to have to give you some fun stories, like locking out of a nuclear sub. Yeah, I didn't like that very much because once you released, you were gone. See ya. They weren't turning around and pick you up either. You know the Navy. We go one way and we go one way slow.
Yep, that's exactly what it's like.
Takes us a week to turn around, or 6 months nowadays.
Sometimes 15, depending on which ship it is.
Oh
How
yeah.
much stuff breaks.
Or we just build a new one and send it out.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the new one you got out there? The Ford? Is that the
The
newest
Ford.
one?
That's
Yeah.
Tim's boat.
Yeah. I see pictures of that thing.
Yep, that was the one I was on.
Wow. They got
Yeah.
good food on there, I take it.
No.
Not really. It still
it was
sucks,
fine.
Really?
Yeah, the food's
Yeah.
not that great. It was fine.
Really?
It was serviceable.
It looks good on YouTube.
Oh,
Says you got all
absolutely.
this food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, it always looks good on YouTube. I promise you. They would do when we were on the water. They would do brunches on Sundays, and every single time it would always be like this fantastic looking like pot roast that. Oh my God, you're looking at it and your mouth is watering, and then you get up there to get served it, and it's like they grabbed like the pot roast that's been sitting in the back of the fridge for a couple of days,
Yeah.
and they put that on your plate. And you're like, what happened to the delicious one that the captain was cutting earlier?
Oh, that's for the chief.
Yeah. That's for the
Chief's
Chiefs,
table.
the ward room, and the Chiefs, and then the rest of us lowly enlisted. We just get whatever scraps are left over.
Yeah.
Best case.
Yeah.
The cartons that hold like the liquid egg that they serve us still says not for human consumption.
Oh, I'm sure.
And we eat the hell out of it.
When I used to go to the Army chow halls, they'd always have what they call dry eggs or whatever, and they'd mix them up.
Mhm.
I said, "Where you been getting your eggs from?" "Oh, yeah, in a box." The Air Force doesn't even know what a box is, let alone an egg in a box. Mine were fresh omelets every day.
Yeah. You guys got the golden goose in the back that they're cracking open.
Yeah, we got some culinary specialists that just got a gig in Europe being the chef of some big hotel.
Oh yeah.
Now it was different. I mean, but I hung out with the other services so much. It's all good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and we always joke in between ourselves and everything too. And it's a long running joke. All of us enlisted folk, we all go through our own BS, and we kind of all bond through it. So
Exactly.
a couple of us Navy guys will make fun of a couple Army guys. They'll make fun of a couple Air Force guys. Everybody makes fun of the Marines. It's a great time.
Oh yeah. In fact, my boss at DHS, Marine Corps, right? He was a 1-star retired Vietnam guy. He says, Ed, because we were telling war stories, right? And me and this other guy had some pretty good ones. He said, well, let me tell you, when I was a young lieutenant in Vietnam, they dropped me in, and 3 months later, I'd come out of the bush. He said, the only way I got a new uniform is I take it off the dead lieutenants. And I was like, damn. And that guy used to smoke 4 packs of Camel a day. I was like, Jesus Christ.
Oh my God.
He'd walk into the op center, and it was just a small center, right? We had probably a dozen people or so. And he'd be yelling at the top of his lungs, and the girls would get intimidated, right? And I was like, why is he so mad? He's not mad. He's just speaking normal. He's a Marine. That's the lowest he ever speaks.
Yeah.
Hey, let me yell back. Hey, everything's doing good, Matt. We're good to go. Okay. Heard you fucked up today. I said, I normally fuck up at least twice an hour. Why should today be any different? God damn it. Just fix it. Okay.
Why should today be any different? Jesus.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was good shit. And he actually knew the real famous Marine, Pitzer.
Mattis?
No, he knew Mattis, but no, the other one during World War II and Vietnam and Korea, the most decorated Marine. Anyway, he knew him. He said, yeah, I knew him when I was a young lieutenant. I was like, fuck, you're old as dirt then. Yeah. Now, he had some great war stories. I was like, damn, those Viet Cong are badasses. And I said, well, what about the terrorists? I said, all I knew is they were running like this. Ah! Boom. And then they'd be like looking up at the sky. Yeah, we used to show films of the AC-130 when they came in. He said, watch this, the guy running one building, we blow it up. We called him the luckiest guy in the Asian part. He said he'd run out of one building, we blow that up. Then he'd run from one building to another, we blow that up. Then he'd run out, and I was like, how in the hell is this guy still alive? And then the guy finally got him about the third time, and I said, I don't think he's running anymore after that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they had some pretty good film.
Yeah.
So we had to review the films. AC-130 guys who have a sense of humor.
I guess they have to with their jobs.
And that's why I said, I always laughed when people said, Al Qaeda's doing this and this. And I said, you want to get rid of Al Qaeda, you got to do the old method. You just got to eliminate them. If you don't, they'll be back. Perfect example is what's going on there now. They've lived there for thousands of years. They've had every invader known to man. They don't care about us. They really don't.
Yeah.
And if people thinks they do, I see these people on TV with sympathy. I'd just like to ship all those people in a little box, send them overseas, show them exactly what it's like. Because those people you see on TV, the terrorists would shoot them in a heartbeat. What a weak group of people you are. Boom, boom, boom. Why do you have red on your hands? We'll just cut them off. Yeah. But, that's America, right? Nobody said we can't have idiots. Well, thanks for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
This has been a very enlightening conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Ed.
We'll see you later. And like I said, you want me back on? It's fine. I got buddies too. Most of them are down in Florida, but
As long as they have internet.
We definitely want to hear some more stories from you.
yeah, I got this one buddy who's so funny. And I was actually in the story with him, and I don't even remember how he came up with all that bullshit, right? So last funny story. So we're in Desert Storm, right? We're coming up, we're doing the war, and I'm up a place called ARAR, which is up in the middle, right by Iraq along the border. 35 kilometers away are the tanks of the Iraqi, and they're aimed, a couple of them are aimed at my tower. So I'm sitting in the tower, and John's my buddy. He's leading the 82nd Airborne up to this other place where they're going to fly in all these C-130s. So he's driving along, and he's got this tobacco in his thing. And he hops out, and everybody's following, right? He hops out of the vehicle, and we're getting all these threats of chemical warfare and stuff. And he accidentally swallows his chew. And he gets out and starts throwing up on the side of the road. So everybody pulls out their chemical gear, starts putting on their chemical gear, thinks a chemical attack. And John's got one of his suits. He thinks there's a chemical attack. He rips half his suit off. He's got his mask up here. He's got all sorts of chew in his mask. And I'm just rolling as he's telling me this story. He says, you won't believe they thought we were on a chemical attack. And here it was just me throwing up in my mask because it swallowed my chew. And I'm rolling. And I said, only John Thompson, the senior master sergeant, could fuck this up. Only you. So,
Jesus
of course,
Christ.
he got a reputation from these guys from that point forward because he's with the Rangers and 82nd, and those guys are shaking their head. you know what that guy did to us? I said, well, did you get your masks on quickly and your suits? Oh, yeah, we got them on real fast. Well, now you're good to go. You know how long it took.
That's
It's
good
good
training.
practice. Good practice.
Good practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then we did the war the next day.
We're gonna go ahead and run this this outro.
Okay,
This
great.
little script for it. So,
Ed, thank you for sharing your stories with us.
and a huge thanks to all of you for listening.
This has been Aaron.
And Tim with Ed.
Appreciate your time.
A massive shout out to Highland Markle for the original music.
Share this episode with somebody who could benefit from it.
Let us know what you want to hear our take on.
Or message us to do a collab.
All pertinent links can be found in the episode description.
Be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Peace.
Legal disclaimer. Our podcast is for entertainment purposes and cannot be substituted for professional medical advice.
If you need help now, please call 911 or 988 for immediate intervention.
Bye.